back to Brian and the Judge. Brian Kilmeade off today. Judge Napolitano with you, 866-408-7669. Dr. Rand Paul is a physician in Kentucky who's the son of the most famous free market defender and libertarian on the planet, Dr. Ron Paul. I hear a rumor, Dr. Rand, and welcome back to Brian and the Judge. We may see your name on a ballot in Kentucky pretty soon. Can you substantiate that rumor?
Well, last week we formed an exploratory committee to run for the U.S. Senate, so that's a definite possibility. We're quite excited. We've put up our new website, randpaul2010.com, so we're very serious about this race down here.
What do Republicans stand for today?
Well, I think that's sort of the problem, and one of the reasons why I'm running is I think Republicans have lost their believability over the deficit. You know, during the 8 years, or 6 out of the 8 years that we controlled during the Bush administration, we doubled the deficit from $5 to $10 trillion. And so I think we lost our believability. Even now, when we are opposing Obama's $1.75 trillion, what do we put up as an alternative? We don't put up a balanced budget. We put up, we'll balance it in 10 years.
I mean, just yesterday, the vote in the Senate on regulating the credit card companies. Look, I don't like paying 18% interest, and I do my best to pay off my credit card bills every month, but I like less the regulation of a private bank by the Congress. Yesterday, 95 senators voted in favor of that. You would probably have been one of the 5 who dissented. So back to my original question. Do Republicans stand for the Constitution? Do they stand for the free market? Do they stand for maximum individual liberty? Do they stand for a small central government? Thomas Jefferson stood for that. Barry Goldwater stood for that. Your father stands for that. I think you do, but I don't know that the party whose nomination you seek since the Bush years has stood for any of those things.
Yeah, I think the problem is that I think our actual platform is pretty good. If you read the Republican platform, it is very much a pro-capitalism, pro-free market document. We just don't adhere to it. So really, I think what we need is new leadership. We need some new Republicans in Washington. Is our platform better than the Democrats? Yeah, I mean, the Democrats truly and openly say government should be the answer to most social and economic problems, whereas Republicans say no, but they just haven't done a very good job of fulfilling that when they get in office. And really, you're right. To my mind, if I were there, I would introduce a balanced budget, because the thing is, let's make it clear-cut. Every time we get in power, we say, we're going to balance it in 5 years. It kind of reminds me of the old Soviet agricultural plans. They were always a fiction from the time they started. Every plan to balance the budget or reduce the deficit over the last 30 years has been a fiction from the moment it was announced.
Well, what is it about people, and your dad and I have talked about that, and I've talked about it here on Brian and the Judge and on my internet show, Freedom Watch, and on the Fox News Channel and the Business Network all the time. What is it, do you think, about people that get in the government who want to make the government bigger, who want to increase its regulations, and who utterly forget about the rules imposed upon the footprint, if you will, of the government set forth in the Constitution?
I would guess that if you took a survey of congressmen and senators, you'd find that most of them don't realize that we have a republic, not a democracy, and most of them couldn't define the difference. And that's a sad state of affairs. I think that's definitely true if you interviewed high school seniors. Most think we are a democracy and have no idea that we're supposed to be a constitutional republic. So that's the kind of thing that I think is really a basic thing you have to start from. The other thing, like on a credit card vote, they don't start from an understanding of capitalism. They don't defend capitalism. They don't understand that the Great Depression was caused by government or the Federal Reserve and not capitalism. The same way with the panic of 2008. I think it's the most important intellectual debate we will have over the next 20 years is what caused it. If we say and we give up and throw our arms up and say, oh, yeah, deregulation caused it or capitalism caused it, we are going to get a wave after a wave after a wave of further nationalizations and control. And that's what we're setting the stage for. But we have to intellectually get up and defend capitalism and let people know that it was the Federal Reserve that caused the panic, which has nothing to do with capitalism.
Do you think the CIA ever lies to the Congress? Do you think Mrs. Pelosi was that out of line the other day to say that?
I think it's kind of a little bit of a charade when you see her up there, because they want to blame Dick Cheney and Bush all for the torture and the different things, but they've been briefed on everything on both sides. I think Jane Harmon's another example of here she is caught up in a wiretap, and she was a big supporter of the wiretap.
Right. Suddenly her views on wiretapping have changed.
So my guess is that if you're on the high levels of intelligence or armed services committee, or you're a leader in Congress, Republican or Democrat, you were briefed all the way through. I think there was something with Jay Rockefeller wanted to reveal some things, but it was top secret. And so that's the other thing. They are somewhat restricted by revealing these things to the public because they're classified as confidential. But I feel certain that she knew all about these programs, the wiretapping. I'm sure she was informed on, as well as the torture. And I think it's disingenuous for her to back away from it. Now, I do think that the debate is somewhat partisan over it now.
Right.
But I think both deserve blame, and they can't back away. It's kind of like the war wasn't just Bush's war. The Iraq war was the Democrats' war and the Republicans' war. And I always tell people, if I were lucky enough to win a race and be in the United States Senate, the one thing I would do is one senator can hold the vote up. I would have held the vote up and said, guys, men and women, we are going to vote like the Constitution says to declare war, up or down, and then we won't have all this, the Democrats won and saying, we voted to use force, but we weren't sure Bush would use force.
It's interesting you say that, because there's two Supreme Court opinions in which the Supreme Court tried to figure out what the heck the Congress meant by the authorization to use military force, known by its initials, AUMF, authorization to use military force. If it had been a declaration of war, it would have been clear what the Congress meant. But because they sort of slapdashed it together, it took the Supreme Court two opinions to figure it out, one of which is that the Geneva Conventions apply, and we can't torture people. You're a physician. Does torture work? And even if it does work, should this government ever do it?
I think it's kind of hard to believe that we would go around the world to defend freedom and torture people. They are so totally opposite that I just can't imagine that's what America would stand for. And while John McCain and I would disagree on a lot of issues, the one thing he has had the guts to do is stand up and say, look, I was tortured, and this is not what America should stand for. And if Republicans can't understand that, and if Republicans want Dick Cheney to be sort of the representative of our party still defending torture, which is not something America stands for, it's just another way to shrink the Republican Party. And that's what I used to say when I was on the campaign trail for my dad, is that the most important news is not who your nominee is going to be, it's how small your party is becoming. Because every primary that I went to that had been Republican, New Hampshire was a good example where the Republican primary used to be bigger than the Democrat primary, they all were smaller.
Right. Be interesting to see which way the Republicans go, in the direction of social conservatives or libertarians. Dr. Rand Paul, it's always a pleasure. Good luck to you in Kentucky. We'll be chatting again with you soon.
Thank you.
866-408-7669. The torture debate continues to rage. What did Mrs. Pelosi know, and when did she know it? And isn't it about time the Republicans took the gloves off? We're right back with your calls on Brian and the Judge.